All right, so this math lesson comes from Chapter 3, Lesson 7. We're talking about estimating decimal sums and differences. So there's actually two ways you can estimate. You can round, or you can use benchmarks to estimate. So the first one we're going to look at is rounding. We're going to look at rounding numbers first. So I have this problem. I have, let's do $27.95, or if it was a decimal, 27 and 95 hundredths, minus $11.72, or 11 and 72 hundredths. Well, if the directions say round to the nearest whole dollar, your whole dollar is going to be this whole number in the ones place value. So I'm going to circle when my directions say the nearest whole number. I'm going to circle the number that's in the ones place value. And I'm going to underline the number to the right of it, which is going to tell me what's going to happen to the number that's circled. So remember my rule. If it's 5 or greater, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you're going to add 1 to the number that's circled. If the number that's underlined is less than 5, so 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0, the number that's circled will stay the same. So if I'm looking at this first number, $27.95, this 9 is telling me that I'm going to bump this 7 up. I'm going to add 1 to the 7 because the 9 is greater than 5. So that means the 7, I'm adding 1 to it. So it becomes 28. Now let's look at the next number. $11.72. This 7 is telling me that I need to add 1 to the 1 because 7 is greater than 5. So if I add 1 to the number 1, that gives me 12. And since this is a subtraction problem, I'm going to put my subtraction symbol there, and then I'm just going to subtract it normally. 8 minus 2 is 6, and 2 minus 1 is 1, and I need to put my dollar sign back. So if a problem says round to the nearest whole number, this is what you would do. Now, if your problem gets more specific and says round to the nearest $10, or the nearest tens, this is what you would do. So if I'm going to go back to the same problem, $27.95 minus $11.72. So when it says the nearest $10, I'm now being asked something even more specific. So this 10 is telling me that I'm looking to do something to the number in the tens place value. So I'm going to circle the numbers that are in the tens place value, and I'm going to underline the number to the right. So same as before now. If the number that's underlined is greater than 5, I need to add 1 to the number that's circled or bump it up. So if this number that's underlined is 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, I need to add 1 to the number that's circled. If this number that is underlined is less than 5, so 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0, the number that's circled stays the same. So this is a 7. This 7 is telling me that I need to add 1 to the number that's circled because it's greater than 5. So 2 plus 1 gives me 3. And since I'm being asked around to the nearest $10, this 7 now turns into a 0. Let me put my dollar sign back. So now let's look at the next number, $11.72. Well, this 1 is telling me that I'm going to actually just keep this number that's circled the same. So I'm going to keep that 1 there because this 1 that's underlined is less than 5. Remember, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0 tells me I'm keeping the number that's circled the same. I'm not touching it. So now, because I'm being asked to round to the nearest $10, I'm going to turn the number that was underlined into a 0. And then I'm going to subtract. like normal now. 0 minus 0 is 0. 3 minus 1 is 2. So my answer is $20. The same thing would apply if it was an addition problem, but instead of subtracting, I would be adding. But the same rules apply when rounding. Now, you might be asked to estimate using benchmarks. Use benchmarks to estimate. So I might say use benchmarks to estimate. If it says this, I want you to think of money. I want you to think of quarters, where you can either have no money, you can have $0, or you can have 25 cents, which would be 1 quarter. You could have 50 cents, which would be 2 quarters. You could have 75 cents, which would be 3 quarters if I'm thinking of money. 3 quarters gives me 75 cents, or in decimal language, 75 hundredths. And I could have 4 quarters, which in money language means $1, or in decimal and just regular math language means 1 whole. So this is what I want you to keep in mind whenever you are asked to do benchmarks. And remember, you need to make sure you're reading the directions very closely, because sometimes it might ask for rounding, which is what we just went over. And sometimes it might ask you to use benchmarks. And they're 2 different strategies. So you need to be reading in the directions very closely. So let's try a problem using benchmarks. So if I have the problem 18 hundredths plus 43 hundredths, I'm going to go back and I'm going to think about my money, which you can see on the side of my screen here. I'm going to think in terms of quarters. Well, if I have 18 cents, is that closer to $0, or is that closer to the 25 cents, 1 quarter? Well, I know 18 cents is closer to 1 quarter, and that decimal would be 25 hundredths, or 25 cents. And then I'm going to add this number. And if I'm thinking money, I'm thinking 43 cents. Because when you don't have a whole number, you don't use dollars. I have 43 cents. So I'm asking myself, is 43 cents closer to the 25 cents, 1 quarter, or is it closer to having 2 quarters, which is 50 cents? Well, I know 43 cents is a lot closer to having 2 quarters and a lot closer to 50 cents. So I'm going to use the benchmark 50 hundredths to represent that. So now when I add this, I'm thinking of money. I have 1 quarter and I'm adding 2 quarters. So this is really easy mental math. 25 hundredths plus 50 hundredths, 25 cents plus 50 cents gives me 75 hundredths, or if I'm thinking in money, it gives me 3 quarters, which is 75 cents. So let's try another problem using benchmarks. If I have the problem 76 hundredths minus 22 hundredths, and my directions say to use benchmarks, because remember, we need to read the directions carefully and make sure we're doing what they're asking. I'm thinking in my head 76 cents. 76 cents, if I'm looking on the side here of my screen where I have the little pictures drawn, 76 cents is pretty close to having 3 quarters, which is 75 cents. And then I'm going to put my subtraction symbol here. Now, this 22 hundredths in money language would say 22 cents. 22 cents, if I look over here on my side screen, well, it's not really close to $0. It is pretty close to 25 cents. So I'm going to use 25 cents, 1 quarter. And when I subtract this, I'm saying I have 3 quarters. And I'm going to take away 1 quarter. Well, if I have 3 quarters and I take away 1 quarter, I'm left with 2 quarters. And 2 quarters equals 50 cents, or 50 hundredths.